The first time the stone spoke to me, I was standing alone in the nave at dawn, when the air still held the cold breath of night and the city outside had not yet remembered itself. I had come early to escape the tourists and the guided lies, to sit with the silence that cathedrals pretend to offer but rarely do. As the light crept in through stained glass older than any nation calling itself modern, the floor vibrated, not with sound, but with intention, and I felt a question settle into my bones. If humans built this, why does it not belong to us? I was not a mystic. I was a structural historian, the kind who spends more time with laser scans and load calculations than candles and prayers. I had dedicated my career to explaining how medieval people, with crude tools and dangerous ambition, raised impossible vaults that still defied gravity centuries later. Flying buttresses, pointed arches, ribbed vaults. These were the answers I taught, the language of reason we use to domesticate wonder. Yet standing there that morning, the explanations felt like a polite story told to children so they would sleep. The building did not feel engineered. It felt grown. The cathedral's scale was the first lie we tell ourselves. We say it is big, monumental, overwhelming, but those words miss the precision. Every stone seemed to know exactly where it belonged, not just structurally, but temporally, as if it had waited centuries to be set there. Tool marks were inconsistent in a way that suggested hands, yes, but hands guided by something that did not need to measure. Mortar samples showed oddities, chemical consistencies that implied control over setting times far beyond what medieval kilns should have achieved. We dismiss these as anomalies, errors of preservation, the noise of time. I had done so for years. Then there were the acoustics. Choirs loved these spaces because sound behaved as if the building itself wished to sing. Whispered prayers could bloom into resonance at specific points, while shouted words sometimes died instantly. Engineers explain this with geometry, but geometry alone does not account for intention. It was as if the walls had been taught how to listen. I began to notice patterns no one talked about. Not the obvious Christian iconography, but the substructure beneath it. Ratios repeating across continents, alignments with stars no longer visible, curves that matched biological growth more than Euclidean planning. When I mapped several cathedrals onto one another digitally, they overlapped in unsettling ways, as if copied from a single template adjusted for local terrain. The distances between key points, the altar, the crossing, the western doors, fell into sequences that mirrored natural phenomena, shell spirals, tree branching, even neural networks. At first, I assumed a lost school of master builders, a guild whose knowledge had been diluted over time. That was comforting. Humans like to believe in forgotten geniuses because it keeps the miracle safely human. But the deeper I went, the more that explanation collapsed. There were too many cathedrals, built too far apart, over too long a span, yet obeying the same hidden rules. Knowledge does not survive that cleanly without writing, and writing does not vanish without a trace. The turning point came not from stone, but from absence. I was reviewing construction records, fragmentary, biased, written by clergy who were not builders, when I noticed a recurring phrase translated loosely as, "They set the foundation." Not we, not the masons, but they. Historians read it as humility before God. I read it as deflection. When pressed for details, the records grew vague, poetic, evasive. The builders were everywhere and nowhere, praised and unnamed. I started asking questions I had avoided before. How did they lift stones weighing tens of tons to heights that modern cranes would struggle with wooden wheels and rope? How did they achieve tolerances that rival laser-guided cutting? Why did so many cathedrals pause for decades, sometimes centuries, only to resume seamlessly as if the plan had never been forgotten? Why did so many cathedrals stand on sites considered sacred long before Christianity arrived, places associated with older rituals and inexplicable energies? The easy answer was faith. The harder answer was coordination across time, a continuity of purpose that outlived individual lives, regimes, even religions. Humans are bad at that. We forget, we argue, we compromise. These buildings did not compromise. When I voiced my doubts to colleagues, they smiled the way adults smile at children who insist they've seen a ghost. I learned quickly which questions were allowed and which would quietly end your invitations to conferences. Academia tolerates eccentricity only until it threatens the scaffolding of accepted truth. So I worked alone, at night, listening to buildings that did not sleep. It was in one such night, deep beneath the cathedral's floor, that I found the void. A cavity not on any plan, sealed with stones that did not match the surrounding masonry. Inside was nothing. No relics, no bones, no treasure. Just space, perfectly shaped, resonant in a way that made my teeth ache. When I stood inside it, the air felt thicker, as if charged. Instruments malfunctioned, compasses spun. It was not empty, it was waiting. I began to think of the cathedrals not as monuments, but interfaces. Machines is the wrong word, too cold and modern. Organisms, perhaps, or instruments tuned to something we no longer perceive. The spires reached upward not just as symbols of aspiration, but as conductors. The crypts sank downward, not just to honor the dead, but to anchor something older. Between them, the nave stretched like a spine, carrying energy, sound, intention.
If humans did not design this, who did? The answer did not arrive as a revelation, but as an accumulation of impossibilities. Medieval society, fractured by war and famine, lacking standardized education, could not have coordinated such a project across a continent. The mathematics involved were not formally described until centuries later. The precision required suggested tools that did not exist, or knowledge that did not belong to that time. I turned, reluctantly, to myth. Not the sanitized myths taught in school, but the older ones, the ones dismissed as superstition. Stories of watchers, of builders from before the flood, of beings who taught humans how to shape stone and read the sky. Legends of angels and giants, yes, but also of quieter presences, those who walked among us briefly, then withdrew, leaving instructions carved into the world. Across cultures, the stories echoed. Not humans, teachers, architects, custodians of balance. They were never gods, but they were never us. The cathedrals, I realized, might not have been built for worship at all. Or rather, not solely. Worship was a cover, a way to keep people coming back, maintaining the structures unknowingly. What if these buildings were anchors, stabilizing something beneath us or above us? What if they were part of a network, a planetary lattice designed to regulate forces we barely understand, magnetic, temporal, dimensional? It sounds insane, I know. It sounded insane to me, too. But sanity is a luxury when evidence piles up without regard for comfort. The final confirmation came when I stopped looking at cathedrals individually and started seeing them as a system. Lines drawn between them traced patterns that mirrored ley lines spoken of in folklore. At their intersections, anomalies clustered. Unusual geological formations, ancient settlements, modern reports of unexplained phenomena. Coincidence is a word we use when we are tired of being surprised. I visited as many as I could, feeling for that same vibration I had noticed at the beginning. Some were dormant, their purpose perhaps fulfilled or interrupted. Others hummed faintly like machines left on standby. In a few, the resonance was strong enough to induce dreams, vivid, shared dreams, reported by people who had never met. Dreams of light moving through stone, of voices speaking without language, of a promise made and nearly forgotten. I never found the builders, not directly, but I found their restraint. Whatever they were, they did not stay, they did not rule, they did not leave instructions written plainly. They trusted time to erode memory until only the structures remained, doing their quiet work while humans layered stories on top. churches, museums, tourist attractions. We repurposed them, misunderstood them, but never dismantled them completely. Perhaps that was the point. Sometimes, standing in a cathedral now, I feel watched, not in fear, but in patience, as if something old is curious whether we will finally notice what we inherited. The stones no longer speak as clearly as they once did. Modern noise interferes. Steel and glass rise around them, interrupting alignments, breaking flows. Some cathedrals have been damaged, burned, bombed. The network is not what it was. Yet they still stand. When people ask me now who built the cathedrals, I give them the answer they expect. Medieval craftsmen, faith, community. I talk about arches and buttresses and the triumph of human ingenuity. It is easier. It keeps the world stable. But inside, I hold a different truth, one that hums quietly like a resonance chamber beneath the floor. Not humans, or not only humans. We were participants, hands guided by something we did not fully see, continuing a project older than our languages. The cathedrals are not monuments to our past, but messages to our future, reminders carved in stone that we were once trusted with more than we remember. And sometimes, when the light hits the glass just right and the air grows thick with intention, I wonder if the builders are not gone at all. Perhaps they are waiting, listening through the walls they taught us to raise, to see if we are ready to understand what we have been standing inside all along.